Today I'm joined by Justin Murphy. He is the father of Other Life, which is a blog, newsletter, and podcast imperium. Imperium? Yeah, no. and of indie thinkers, which is also the place where I met Justin, which is a community of intellectuals on the internet. Hi, Justin.
Hey Alex, thanks for having me. How you doing today?
Good, good. I'm excited to talk to you because you're kind of one of the first people that I met who are, really involved in thinking on the internet and, putting yourself out there. And, you've kind of created this whole brand for people like me to understand how, how this business works, if you could call it a business, this grift to be on the internet and to, have a voice. So yeah, I'm grateful for that. I mean, I met Default Friend through you. You're a super connector. I really like the platform. So yeah, I'm excited to chat to you.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. Thank you very much for that. And I remember when we first met. Yeah, it was a couple years ago, probably. I guess, right?
It
Or
was
1 year ago,
it
maybe.
was last I think August or September. So
Right on. I remember. It's cool because you were talking about getting more serious about your work on the internet, and you've really gone and done it. I see you out there working hard and really
tweeting
posting
hard,
things.
yeah, tweeting hardest.
Doing hard, but now you're doing the podcast. No, no, seriously, sincerely. I mean, you're doing really well. Like you're taking your own ideas and your own internet project seriously, as you should, if you believe in the things you say, and you're getting results. Like your influence and profile are they're growing, and it's really cool to see. So good for you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. It's definitely, not in little part, your influence and stuff that I've learned, just, reading the forum and yeah, chatting to people and seeing other people do it. So it's really good.
Love to
So
hear.
so really happy you're doing this. Um,
Well, I mean, it's worth pausing on because a lot of people think that it's like getting clout on the internet is like an accident. You're just like if you're this or you're that or something happens. But no, you can actually decide to develop your own intellectual project and be systematic about it, and you can actually succeed in growing your audience pretty rapidly. And you're a really good example of that. So you decided you wanted to do it. It's not like you just one day started getting like favored by the algorithm or something. You decided you wanted to take your ideas more seriously and start working on them more publicly and grow an audience, and you are doing a great job because you decided to and you put in the work. So I just wanted to pause on that.
yeah, I think, there's a little bit of being deliberate in it. It's kind of you try stuff and you see that some stuff works. Like for me, Twitter was really a surprise. Like I didn't really expect to, work on Twitter to write tweets to get that much of traction. So that was really surprising. And then, people were asking me, why not do a podcast? So kind of from one angle to the other, I was like, yeah, this could be a real thing. It was definitely a proof of concept, but I feel like you need kind of a bit of a proof of concept or something because I see some people who are kind of trying to build everything from the bottom up, this whole sprawling Substack podcast combo with all the newsletters and everything, but they don't have a proof of concept yet. And I feel like a lot of people kind of that's a point of failure because you can't build everything at the same time. You need like that one thing that's going to be your anchor point, or at least that was the case for me, where I was like, yeah, okay, people like to hear this stuff, and it's a bit of a market test.
I completely agree with that. That's good insight.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk to you about what's coming up because you've got your finger on the pulse of culture, of online culture. You talk to people who are involved, they're neck deep in this stuff every day. The IDW or whatever is left of it is crumbling before our very eyes. There's a handful of people going off on wild goose chases about postmodernism. There's other people who are fawning over porn stars on their podcasts, and there's the center doesn't hold. So I'm really curious, what do you see, what's the face of the new thing that's coming up? Well, what is it?
Yeah, I think the IDW is a bunch of kind of paranoid Gen Xers who are kind of very pleased with their newfound internet clout, but they don't really know what to do with it. And I think they're a little too pleased with themselves. And then they also become kind of delusional a little bit about their own power and influence, but then also delusional about the forces holding them back. And it's very funny how very smart people can devolve into what are really actually rather childish and immature ways of thinking, namely around the man or the system, and holding them back and suppressing them. And so I think it's been very funny and interesting to watch, though, this IDW uh, phenomenon, just to watch it evolve. Like, you give a bunch of talkative Gen X men some internet clout, and it doesn't go well. It just doesn't go well. So it's been an interesting thing to watch, though. Obviously, that's on the downhill. That I don't think ever was going to be a. I mean, it was a cultural moment for sure, and those guys have substantial audiences, and so I'm not knocking them. They can enjoy that and carry on, but it's obviously not the the center of the action anymore. It's obviously on the downslide. You see this with a lot of internet projects where it's like, if you get really big, that's great, but then often what happens is they kind of cash out, and then it's just like you can coast you can coast for a long time if you have a large audience, even though what's actually happening under the scenes is you're on your way out, but it takes a long time to go to zero, right? So you can coast, and that's no problem. That's how I see the IDW. To me, the real cultural action is mostly with Gen Z internet edgelords. To me, this is like, if you want to know where the future is, look at the kids who are in college now, who just, they don't care about anything, and they like to go on the internet and what they call shitpost, whatever. It's kind of like the whole 4chan thing, except now it's more popularized among the cool kids who go to college, right? So it used to be 4chan was this relatively obscure thing for relatively disaffected men, not completely, but that was generally that was, to my knowledge, to the degree we have any data at all about it, that is more or less accurate about what the 4chan moment was. But that kind of attitude now has diffused a bit to, like, the average cool Gen Z college kid is basically, in their own attitudes and lifestyle, they're like a 4chan shit poster. And this is now cool among the cool kids in Gen Z college circuits. To me, that's fascinating, and not a lot of people know it because, to be fair, a lot of these kids are somewhat concerned about, they don't want to get canceled or whatever, but they're not anxious about it. They just use a pseudonym, and then they fuck around and enjoy their life and be like, schizo on the internet as a form of, like, cultural rebellion. There's a lot of that, but a lot of these people are very smart and very interesting. And to me, that's going to be like the next big wave of what's really hot and powerful in the culture. That's one thing, but we could go on to a few other different pockets. But I don't want to lecture too much. Should I keep going, or do you want to?
Yeah, no, no, keep going. It's all news to me. But also, I have noticed that among the shit posters that I interact with, some of my favorites now on Twitter, they sometimes let slip that they're like 21 or 22, and I'm like, whoa, I thought we're all millennials here. But yeah, it's definitely a thing.
Yep, yep. And then there's, I mean, another wave I think to look out for, which is the wave I guess I'm associated with, is young but middle-aged adults, 20 in the 20s and 30s, who have invested sometimes quite a lot in some kind of traditional institutionalized intellectual domain, but it's just increasingly clear to them that that is all bottoming out and there's really no opportunities for them there. And so what's happening is, let's say you've done a PhD, or maybe you've done a master's or whatever. You've put some amount of sunk cost into some kind of traditional prestige pursuit, whether that's in humanities and science and arts, whatever. There's a lot of people like that who are very smart, they're disciplined, and they were kind of playing the prestige climb the ladder game, and they're just kind of realizing, like, oh, this ladder goes nowhere. It's just like, I submit to extraordinary kind of self-censorship and arbitrary idiotic constraints on my work and what I'm capable of to get to some, perch of power, but that perch of power isn't even there anymore. That's going to be a massive wave, an increasing wave, I think. And I'm even more certain of this one because I'm watching it. I'm close. I'm in this wave. I am this wave, frankly. Not to take too much credit,
Mhm.
but I called the shot a couple years ago. I took my chances on defecting from the prestige track, and it's been nothing but good. It's been amazing. Everything I predicted would happen has been happening, it's awesome in every possible way, frankly. And now there's a lot of other people doing that, and I know that because a lot of them come to me, and we're figuring out all different ways to do that, and from different perspectives and different domains and different styles for different types of work. And I think that's going to be massive over the next 10 years. I think you're going to see more and more people, just like an analog here is, it's arguably the same phenomenon, but in a slightly different milieu. It's the New York Times journalists who go to Substack, right? They quit New York Times to write a Substack. That's essentially what I did with academia 2 years ago. And you're going to see more and more people doing it. I think Substack is probably an overrated phenomenon. Like, it's cool, it's good, but I don't think Substack isn't going to be the massive magnet that sucks up all of the energy. I think Substack is a kind of momentary, trendy thing, which is it's cool. I'm not throwing shade at all, but I don't think it's not like I wouldn't expect in 10 years every serious intellectual has a Substack. I think that's just like a momentary thing that has given people a certain kind of brand, a certain kind of license. Like, once a few high power people do Substack, then all the other people are like, oh, this is legitimate. This is, in a way, there's a kind of magnet to Substack because it allows people to do internet stuff without seeming like a loser, But I think we're soon getting to a place where the best Substack people are going to basically have to build their own media companies, and then they're going to the best Substack authors are going to, over time, essentially become like what I'm doing with a kind of multi-channel little personal media company, because that's going to be the natural way of growing. That's my take on that. So I see Substack as kind of one relatively minor specific example within this larger movement, and I think the larger movement is going to be much bigger and happening across different channels. You're already seeing people. Since I quit academia, a lot of people who are like quitting academia to go on the internet naturally reach out to me, and I can tell you there's just a lot of them doing it. You might not have heard of them yet, but I suspect in 10 years we will have enough data and distance to realize that, oh wow, the you know the 2020s were this period of mass defection from prestige institutions. It's definitely already started, but I think it's going to keep continuing. I could go on, but maybe tell me what you're thinking about, or what of this interests you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited about this change because I'm kind of trying to be part of it as well. But I think you're absolutely right. That's essentially kind of the tension that I've had with being on Substack, being on Patreon is essentially I feel like I'm living on borrowed time and on borrowed ground, and just building something on someone else's platform. And I think like a lot of solutions of being the tech layer for people like me. And I know some people are doing this. Some people have pitched this to me. I haven't pulled the trigger yet because what I like about Substack, what I like about Patreon is that it's a trusted thing. People know what it is. They're not shy of putting their credit card information in there. They know this is a brand. If I just add my own layer to it and say, okay, this is the Alex portal, just shove your credit card information in here. I feel like that would be, that's a bit of a thing. So I think I think there's some accommodation to that, private layer that people need to have, that I don't think is given yet. So that's kind of why I would be hesitant to build it myself. And also, I'm a bit of a tech
Hmm.
philistine. So
Yeah, no, totally. It makes sense. It makes sense. It makes sense for this moment in the transition, but it's not going to be stable for a few reasons. One is that these services actually do take quite a lot of money. Substack, it's about
yeah,
10%. Patreon, I think it ends up being around there, maybe a little bit less, but those really add up. And at a certain point, if you're really growing and you're making really good money, at a certain point, you're looking at your bank statements and you're like, oh wow, I'm like leaving a lot of money on the table just by having these services perform these middleman functions that often don't really provide that much value. So I think it's a very delicate situation for them to be in. I don't think it's going to be very sustainable. And I think the issue you point out about feeling a little weird about asking someone for their credit card or whatever, I think that's just going to pass as this sort of thing becomes more normalized, right? It's like, if people are happy to give their credit card to Patreon and Substack and this and that, at a certain point, they're going to be grateful to you for consolidating all of those things into one thing. And if they're paying you through those other services, it means they trust you. So they're going to be happy to give you their credit card. I think honestly, they probably already would be. But like you said, people like you don't really want to take on that, challenge of like building that themselves. But honestly, it's not that hard. And I think, as you continue to gain power, Alex, I think you'll eventually be looking, for options that you control more.
Yeah, yeah, that definitely makes sense. I mean, I've been keeping my feelers out for options, but also, there's just there's inertia, yeah, which is never to be underestimated. Which is also why I haven't yet installed Urbit, which is the thing I've seen you talk about lots lately,
Well,
and you're
Urbit is sort
very
of like the dark horse in all of this.
mhm.
It's definitely a moonshot. It's a long shot. It's like I definitely wouldn't, bet the farm on the whole world moving to Urbit in the next 5 years, maybe not even the next 10 years. I don't really know, but what I do know, what I'm very impressed by Urbit for is that it basically sees all of these problems way ahead, and it's basically this system that has been engineered to avoid all of these problems that we're talking about from the ground up. So in terms of the attractiveness of the system, it's very impressive. And I definitely think, you look at Bitcoin, you look at crypto, I do think right now that superior systems, like if you build them, they might seem obscure. People might, think it's crazy for a long time. But if it's a truly superior system that really represents a way of fundamentally overhauling all of the problems of the current paradigm, I'm interested in those types of projects. So yeah, it's definitely a dark horse, but Urbit would basically solve a ton of these problems. So that's why I'm quite interested in it increasingly, but it's a long shot.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like it feels kind of like this, like you said, like the dark horse, like this. The usability of it is really, it's a black box. It's like you need to install this, crypto thing on your computer, but you need to use command line to do it, and
Well,
there's
they've
there's
made that much simpler. They are doing very well on that right now. They're working hard on that, and you can now get a hosted Urbit where you don't have to touch the command line. You basically just sign up and log in like any website. So that is available now. If you wanted to play around with it, that's quite doable. And they are, making some gestures to trying to support creators more. I think they understand the role that they could play in what we're talking about. So I would just stay tuned. Stay tuned for that. I think there's some chance it becomes more practical and more interesting and useful for people like you and I. And it's an interesting concept for sure.
cool. I've also seen you talk to, oh, is it Mike Elias from Idea Market? I thought that was such an interesting project. Such a, yeah. I don't know. What's your vibe about that? Seems like a kind of the ultimate way of monetizing yourself if you're just like this, loosely configured thinker.
It's an interesting concept for people who don't know what you're talking about. This guy Mike made a platform which is basically it's kind of like a stock market for internet figures. And so it's a little complicated, but basically it allows people to more or less buy shares in someone if they think that person's stock price is going to rise. If they trust that person, they might buy some shares. And what that does is it puts it into a yield bearing account. And so if they buy stock in you, you actually earn interest on that. The more people that buy your stock, the more interest you will earn. And if your stock price rises later, they can cash out if they want to, that kind of thing. So it's interesting. I think I'm agnostic about that platform in particular. I think he's cool. He's smart. It's an interesting project. I hope it succeeds. But with these sorts of phenomena, you always have to look at the larger question is always more interesting. You never know what individual platform or project is going to succeed. And what I do think is extremely interesting and promising in all of that is, I mean, I feel very bullish that crypto is going to make significant impact on how the intellectual life is measured and judged. Because the fact is, right now we live on an internet where lying is more or less incentivized. Like there's really no
Mhm.
penalty for being wrong, and there's no penalty even for lying really on the public internet today. And so that's a massive, massive problem that is going to need to be solved. I mean, that's probably multi-billion dollar market if you can basically solve the lying problem on the internet. And then it's
Yeah.
also a matter of people want, like, humans more or less refer to social cues in their judgments, right? There's been a lot of research done on this, like not to sound like an elitist or anything, but a very, very small number of people make their own independent judgments is just a basic fact. And the overwhelming majority of people, even people who you might think of as like fairly smart, fairly educated people, even most of those people generally make their judgments based on the judgments of the people around them who they respect. This has been very well documented. It's a very small minority that ignores all social cues and just using logic and reason alone makes their own judgments. But it all trickles down from there, right? The cues come down from there. And so having reputable, trustworthy systems that can actually tell you, like an index that could tell you how trustworthy is Alex, how trustworthy is Justin. Um, if you could build a system that actually conveys that information, it's extremely valuable, and it's going to change everything, because right now you get incentivized to lie, but when we have that kind of system, you get incentivized to tell the truth. Like, imagine a world where, like, the more truth you tell, the more credit you get and the more money you make. Imagine that world. We live in the opposite of that, right? So I'm fundamentally convinced that crypto is increasingly going to be the way that this happens. It has to happen, and crypto does have some interesting ways of doing it. We can talk, if you're interested in that, we can talk a little bit more about it. But prediction markets would be another one, and so there is a way of imagining that, you know, like, you can imagine Twitter basically having a kind of prediction market layer where built on top of Twitter. Every time you tweet something, you have to, like, put a little bit of money on it or something like that. Imagine that. Or maybe you could tweet other things, but imagine every Twitter account, it became normalized to put small amounts of money on bets regarding everything that you say. And then you can imagine a kind of index page where I could basically look to see everyone's scores, right? I could see how often has Alex been right when she's actually put her own money on the line. So that's an easy way to imagine this materializing. But, like, the idea market idea, there are many different ways of trying to implement this. So I'm confident something like that is going to win, and it's absolutely going to be revolutionary. But it's still early days, and we don't know how it's going to look exactly.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds promising. It's kind of like that Robin Hanson idea of, futarchy, just to organizing society by bets. I think there is some truth to. I mean, there is some a lot of value to it. But I could imagine that, the concept of truth that you're kind of reifying with this type of stuff is pretty unilateral in a way. It works for some types of information, but a lot of time truth is essentially what trickles down from what is high status, what has prestige is true in kind of that, that limited sense that we see now. There are many things that are very interpretable. They're not really true in an absolute sense. They're aligned with prestige, and some things are completely counter to prestige, so they're false, which is kind of the dynamic that we have now. And in a way, even when you say something that is, maybe false in a literal sense, it might be true because it's aligned with, with prestige. So I think it's an interesting. There's a lot of philosophical conundrums to be solved by this, but yeah, I don't know. It sounds like, I don't know if it's like the universal key to
Oh
everything. I
yeah,
don't know.
sure,
That
sure. There's lots of ideas and statements that can't be measured in that way for sure. But I would bet you that people who make accurate statements that are verifiable using prediction markets, when they talk about the more abstract stuff that's harder to measure, you're going to trust them more, right? So it's like, you're totally
Mhm.
right, but people who are caught being wrong multiple times, you probably also shouldn't trust their, like, generalized life advice either, right? So
Yeah.
that'd be my answer to that.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's kind of like a bit of a social credit score. I mean, whatever you think about this, it's almost an inevitability to have something like this. I mean, you already have it. Twitter has it. Almost any platform you're in has a
Yeah,
score for
see, I'm
you.
really into social credit scores. I just don't want them run by, like, the CCP or whatever. I want really really accurate and kind of like, voluntarily managed social credit scores. So if the measurement is really good and accurate, and people have the freedom to kind of enter into or enter out or exit those credit scores, then that's what I want personally. I think that's a really good thing. I think we need more measurement. Like, one of the big problems we have in Western societies is people can be bad characters and they never get punished for it. Like, this is a major problem to me. So it's like, I think if you fuck up your life badly through being sinful in some kind of way, you should be somewhat shamed for that. Not brutally, and everyone should deserve a second chance, and we should practice forgiveness and sympathy and all these things for sure. But we need a little bit of negative stigma against people who have bad ethics. It's like, but we've completely thrown that out the window. So it's like, I definitely don't want a social credit system that's managed by the CCP, but I would love a system where, like, if you're poor because of no fault of your own, then you get more sympathy than people who are poor because of actually making bad moral choices. I think I would welcome a system that accurately measures that personally.
Yeah, I kind of echo that as well, because that, to me, that's the key to scaling any society. Because we've had these incentive systems baked into communities back in the day, where your literal neighbor would start wagging their finger at you and would tell on you in church and stuff like that, and it was oppressive and weird, and but it worked, and that's kind of how we lived for since the dawn of time, and
Totally, you need it, and we now live in this situation where there are pretty hideous ethical crimes that have just been completely normalized. I mean, I'm sure you talk about many of these, and I mean, one that's popular to talk about right now is, of course, the normalization of sex work. I think I've heard you, talk about that at some length.
Mhm.
But one that's so
Yeah,
normalized, even the trad people don't really talk about it that much, is adultery and cheating, just casual cheating or messing around. I am horrified by how normalized this is. It seems like it's
yeah,
so acceptable now that even trad people don't complain about it or scoff at it. But I'm genuinely horrified when I watch any TV show, any movie. It's like some amount of adultery is treated as completely fine, more or less, in almost all contemporary culture. But as far as I'm concerned, like as a married man, I wonder if you relate to this, Alex, but like cheating is a horrific crime. I mean, it's a major it's a serious violation, not only of the other person but of yourself as well. I mean,
yeah,
it can destroy relationships truly, and the violence that kind of transgression can inflict on the integrity and the harmony of a relationship is can be earth shattering. And there's just like no representation of this
yeah.
anywhere. There's no punishment for cheating. So many people who we admire, who are famous and influential, there are well documented cases of infidelity or indiscretion in their life, and no one in our culture faults them at all. No one looks down at them at all for it. But to me, it's like
Yeah.
if you're an adult person and I admire you for any way for any of your achievements, but you also like cheated on your wife, you're dead to me. You're dead to me, that's how it should be, because it should be at that level of unacceptable crime. And just as you said, if it was a small community, it with that really required loyalty and strong relationships for that community to survive, then that kind of thing would get its proper stigmatization. But in our culture, many things such as cheating, that's just one example, completely go under the radar, and our moral systems in our society aren't even able to measure them or sense them or feel them as evils.
Yeah, but I also think that whatever our moral system might be, in the wider world, people still feel these as moral injuries to themselves, and they accumulate these. And I really feel like be it sex work, be it adultery, be it just like completely abusing yourself with drugs and alcohol and all this stuff. This stuff, this is not good for you. And even whatever BuzzFeed tells me today, it's like, oh, this is absolutely chill, you should be chill about it. But there's a disconnect there, and when you fucked up. And I see a lot of people kind of caught in that prison between, okay, people, society tells me this is all okay and this is how it should be. I have this tension inside that this is a destabilizing situation that I've put myself in. But it's not, you can't really make peace with it until you've made peace with the fact that it's not good. And I feel like society is really doing it people a disservice by not confirming that, yeah, this is shitty behavior, you should be ashamed.
Totally. I'm curious, Alex, do you have any other personal pet peeves when it comes to like moral wrongs in society that have been normalized that other people don't talk about?
Pet peeves.
Not pet peeves, but like things that no one else talks about, but you think are super evil.
Super evil. Yeah, it's hard to say. I feel like, to be honest, casual sex culture, I think, is really really evil.
Totally.
Like, yeah, I feel like it brings it's completely not what it pretends to be. It is the complete, in a way, the complete opposite. It's the opposite of freedom. It's consistently terrorizing for most people in it. It's terrorizing for even the people who are dropped out of it because they can't participate because they're so terrorized by it. Like it's not a good. It encourages like these winner take all dynamics. It's really really yeah, that's probably
I
one of my
completely
biggest pet
agree. I
peeves.
completely agree. I'm somewhat ashamed to say I did a fair bit of sleeping around in my 20s, and I really do think it really took something from my soul. It took a big chunk out of my soul. Like it still doesn't sit well with me, and I was never particularly bad in any way, but pretty just normal, I guess. And I do think that you do way more harm to yourself and probably to others in ways you don't even know. And you know what I think, Alex? I wonder what you think about this. Is I sometimes wonder if the whole Me Too thing, the whole like moral panic that we're going through now, where it's like every week there's a new allegation from some like person who did something bad like 10 years ago. How much of that do you think is actually just a kind of sudden awakening to the moral repulsiveness of all the casual sex everyone's been having in their youth? You know what I mean? It's like I almost think that sometimes because I sometimes I don't know. It doesn't like haunt me or anything, but I sometimes occasionally will just have memories of my dissolute lifestyle in my 20s, and I'll just feel a little gross, like, and like I said, I don't even do anything that bad, but just like girls I dated that I slept with, but we never really like it never really turned into anything serious. It was just kind of like you give away a piece of your soul to someone, and they give away a piece of their soul to you, and then you both just kind of like walk away and like shit on it. It's just like that kind of thing. I do look back on random examples of that and just feel kind of sad and like gross, And I've often wondered how much of like these women who like wake up and they're like, oh my god, I was raped 10 years ago. Sometimes I'm like, of course, some of them are accurate, and I would never like dismiss that out of hand. But I do, given it's a kind of like trendy thing, and some of the accusations are definitely tenuous at best. I do sometimes actually wonder how much of that is actually a causal effect of just this generalized grossness of casual sex that we all participate in.
Yeah, yeah, I think that there's a lot to that, and it's also the fact that the idea that you have sexual freedom just means that you don't have any sexual norms. You don't know how you should be behaving. So the fact that people behave awkwardly or have weird, uncomfortable sexual encounters is that there's no standard. If the standard is anything goes, and you anything goes for you and anything goes for me, and consent is negotiated second by second, there's absolutely no way that doesn't lead to a train wreck where at least someone, there's always a power imbalance in these things. Someone's hornier, someone's more in love,
Right.
someone's, there's always that. And also this thing, I see this a lot in kind of manosphere circles, and the idea that you can negotiate a relationship from the start. And people say, okay, the girl said she wanted no strings attached sex, because a lot of women do this. They try to kind of have intercourse and try to kind of lure guys into a relationship, and they say that in the beginning, and a lot of these guys say, oh, okay, it's unfair that they do that, but it's also you can't really know what the outlines of a relationship are going to be from the start. And it's not just it's not always like entrapment or anything. It's like things evolve. There's something happening when you have sex with someone that you can't really foresee. You can't really put in a term sheet the second you meet someone. So I feel like that part is completely ignored by this. It's like the idea that you're constantly consensually engaging with someone second by second is just nuts.
Totally. Can I tell you one more pet peeve of mine that I feel like is a major social evil that goes totally unremarked? It's
Yeah.
so everyone in Western society is against um, like adults having sex with minors, but you know what? No one is against, which I'm very strongly against, is minors having sex with each other. This should be taken as seriously as minors having, like, think about this. We all get horrified when we hear of a 16-year-old having sex with a 20-year-old, but we should be just as horrified by a 16-year-old having sex with another 16-year-old. This should be we should be terrified by this. We should be absolutely up in arms about that. And I'm personally of the opinion that sex should be illegal until you're 18, straight up, because the amount of kind of spiritual damage that young people can do to each other is at least as great, honestly, as as the spiritual or physical or emotional damage that a slightly older person can do. So I think that's super underrated in terms of the actual ongoing ethical evils that permeate our society. Is basically young kids mistreating each other, breaking each other's hearts when they're so impressionable and they're so emotional and sensitive. I think that's a real shame, and yet there's virtually no constituency that is in any way worried about
Yeah.
the spiritual harm that 16-year-olds do to other 16-year-olds. So that's my other hill that I
Yeah.
would like to die on.
No, yeah, I think I think it's a worthy hill as well. Because I mean, I when I had my first boyfriend, I was like 15, and he was 17 and going on 18, and I've always felt like, okay, if things are going to become illegal, you can't date me now because you're an adult, and we're just joking about that. And really, like, things kind of felt a bit dangerous once he turned 18, and it was a very weird situation. I mean, obviously there's a reason to have these delimitations, and you kind of have to draw the line somewhere. But in terms of, philosophically looking at this, yeah, that's, it's a very equivalent situation.
Oh, that's interesting. Is that your husband or that was a former boyfriend?
That was a former boyfriend. Yeah, I mean, my
Okay,
husband, I wish I was that trad. No,
so how did you how did you
I
handle
met
that?
my
Did you just
husband.
agree to not have illegal sex, or like, well, obviously you don't have to share if you don't, but you brought it up. I was just curious. How did you decide to go?
Yeah, no, no. I mean, we were just panicked. I don't think we've handled it in any logical way or anything. Yeah, we didn't agree to do anything. We are just like, oh my god, we need to be really secretive about this stuff. But I mean, we were in this relationship like a year before he
Right,
turned
right.
18. But
Yeah, that
yeah,
shows that shows
yeah.
the nonsensical nature of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a weird one. It's kind of like your famous Greta Thunberg
Yeah.
tweet with yeah, which I have to agree with. I mean, people obviously always only take the negative side of that, which is, obviously that, people should be sleeping with Greta Thunberg, but that's not the point you were trying to make, and I think that's a
Of course
a
not.
good
No,
one. But
all
yeah,
all
it's
the smart people get it and agree with it, and the rest of the world that's retarded is up in arms about it. Yeah.
Yeah, just parenthesis in case you're one of the two people who have not read this tweet. It's essentially, comparing the case of the whole world bowing to the geopolitical musings of this one, whatever, 15, 16-year-old Swedish girl, and then also not understanding that, children at 16 can't give consent, or teenagers at 16 will not give sexual consent, and
I mean, I
people,
can cite it
freaking out
verbatim
about
because
that layer of it.
it still gets brought up on my feed by haters to this day. So I see it so much still
Yeah,
that
please
I
do
can cite
cite
it
it
by heart for
verbatim.
people
It's a
who
good
didn't hear
tweet.
what I said. I said, if you believe that a 16-year-old has the maturity to guide global policymaking, then you really can't object to Jeffrey Epstein paying 16-year-olds for sex. That's what I said. And we have some serious
Yeah, fair
we
enough.
have some serious knots in our kind of so in our in the ethical systems that dominate society right now. We have some very sharp contradictions that really don't add up, and if you kind of put them together in a way that kind of shows them, yeah, people get super pissed.
Yeah, yeah, and it's interesting because I feel like, the backbone of our current social illusion is this idea of, the self-making self, the perfect individual that, can is always consent based. They always, there's some little, homunculus behind the eyes that's pulling the strings, that's deciding, moment for moment exactly what's going on and what they want to do and what their identity is, what their preferences are, and people don't want to be slaying that sacred, that sacred calf. That's the one thing. So anything that goes against this idea of, complete self creation every moment, then it's gonna clash with that information.
Totally.
Yeah. So I wanted to also ask you about the internet, because you've been a little bit critical about the internet recently. I mean, you're a creature of the internet. You've built a platform on the internet. and you've put it in a really nice way. Like how can you use the internet? How can you be active on it without having it steal your soul? Or is that possible to have it as a tool rather than have it as a
Well, I think
demon?
that, yeah, the trick is, and this is what most people are intuitively realizing as we speak, and it is what more and more people are doing naturally. But it is essentially the solution is to, if you have real ideas that you want to develop in the world and you want to shape the culture, if you do have this kind of calling to develop a long-term intellectual project, then intrinsically, yes, you want to be in the mix. You want to be, shaping society, and you want your ideas to have an impact on the world. So you do want to be active on the internet. You do want to, what they call, grow an audience, which is just a kind of vulgar way of putting that you want your ideas to come to fruition in the world, to have influence in the world. And so I don't think there's any question of getting off the internet or going into the woods or something like that. But what I think you want to aim for is a kind of system where you are protecting a ton of free, quiet time to do the high quality, original, focused, patient work of genuine thinking, reading, and writing, separated from social opinion completely. And then you want to take that work that's isolated and protected from social opinion, and then you want to build a system where you drop that onto the internet in some kind of systematic way, to influence the world and to share your ideas. That's the ideal. But the question is, how do you do that, and what are the pitfalls? Because there are many pitfalls. I mean, one of the biggest problems we have today is that all of these websites we use are designed to make us get sucked in, and so this is reaching terrible proportions. It's like, I don't know if you relate to this, but we're now reaching a point where even if you're relatively disciplined like me and you're relatively like, I don't even go on Twitter or Facebook or whatever for fun. Like I'm not even that type of person who is very pulled into it. But when I go onto Twitter to like share a few things or something like that, I find myself like I'm like still on it an hour later. Or the worst thing is when you're just switching between things. Like, okay, I have a new blog post. I'm gonna share it on Twitter. I'm gonna maybe write about it a little bit on Twitter real quick. Then I'm gonna share it on, Facebook or whatever. It's like you try to do these short, discrete things, and it takes 15 minutes of switching costs. There's research on this where when you switch tasks, it takes you
Mhm.
cognitively about 15 minutes to even get settled into the new task, basically. So you're paying an extraordinary cognitive tax just simply being on these websites at all, trying to, even if you're in this very very controlled and patient way like I'm talking about, even in the best of cases, you're paying huge cognitive tax and switching costs, and then you're also getting sucked in because the websites are literally designed to make you stay there, right? So it's really, I think it's reaching a kind of critical threshold. I think it's becoming so bad, and now there's also the proliferation of platforms, which is another massive problem, right? So I'm sure you've felt this before. It's like, oh, Clubhouse. Now everyone's on Clubhouse. And look, on Clubhouse, if you talk for 5 hours a day, every day, you can get to like 1 million followers pretty quickly. And it's like, if you're trying to, develop a public intellectual life, that's very tempting, right? You do kind of feel like, oh, maybe I should be on Clubhouse. Maybe like, but then after Clubhouse, it's another platform, right? So there's this constant kind of frenetic energy and proliferation of platforms that is constantly pulling you from one thing to the next. And so what do you do? What do you do about this? I do think that if you want to develop a kind of independent intellectual life in today's world, especially if you're working outside of institutions, which means, the internet is your institution in a way, then I do think we need to be super serious and systematic about this. It's not like, this is not a minor question. This is not like a minor lifestyle question. This is like one of the questions. Like, what do you do? What should you invest your time in? What should you not invest your time in? And I'm increasingly of the view that the solution a lot of people are naturally gravitating to, which I think is generally, directionally correct, is you have a private community that is very high quality, that has similar aligned goals as you, but you don't want it to be ideologically captured. And that's one of the biggest pitfalls, I think, because lots of people know, you can find DM groups and Slack groups and this and that. There's a lot out there. People listening to this are probably in a few different kind of, informal internet private communities. I find the problem with those is that they naturally become kind of ideologically captured, whether they want to or not. It becomes like an in group. making fun of the out group. In my experience, almost all of those groups generally devolve into that kind of spirit, and I think that's generally that's a spirit of resentment, and that's its own kind of capture. Which I think, if you want to do long term intellectual work, that's as bad a situation and as serious a failure mode as any. Being caught up in an overly in group kind of, we're smart and all and them, they're dumb. That's really bad. And so, in my experience, a lot of DM groups and private groups go to that. So the whole idea behind indie thinkers really is this thesis, basically, that increasingly the world is moving to, the internet is obviously moving to internet communities, to private communities, because the public web is so chaotic and cognitively bad in many ways. But then the question is, how can you engineer that private community in a way that actually generates independent thought rather than kind of group hive mind thought? And so, yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. That's my wager with indie thinkers, and there is a kind of larger kind of theoretical, I guess, hypothesis behind it. But I think other people are going to do the same thing. Other people are going to figure this out. So that's where I think things are going, and that's frankly one of the reasons why I'm a little bit more bullish on Urbit than I think the average person, because they kind of have this architecture that they've been working on for a very long time, which is extremely systematic and sophisticated, which goes in this direction of extremely robust private communities that own all of their data and can't be censored and can't be in any way meddled with, really. And it's, for people listening, by the way, Urbit's probably very obscure, but it's not like one of these. There have been many kind of alternative platforms, right, that have arisen. People think of Gab or Parler or whatever, but all of those failed because they're trying to play on the normal internet. That's the problem with all those platforms, right? Parler can get kicked out of the App Store, whatever. These Gab can have their like a bank account shut down, whatever. Urbit is like a different kind of internet. It's literally a different type of networking model. Urbit doesn't compete with Twitter or Facebook. It competes with the internet as we currently use it. It's a different kind of internet. So, like I said, it's a long shot, but it is kind of designed from the ground up to be impervious to these problems, and it really goes in a radically kind of community based way. So that's my directional hypothesis for the near future. Everything will increasingly go to private communities, and then we will still be coming up for air on the public internet, but really just to post things. So I guess my final little bit of concrete answer to your question is, I think increasingly, like, for people like you and people like me who have a bit of influence, we have a kind of clear brand. People know us for certain ideas that we develop over time, and we have fans or whatever, and an audience who values us and respects us. But we're still relatively small. People like you and I are still relatively small. To me, the next big move that I think people like you and I need to really focus on is finding a way to more or less hire someone to do the frontline work of actually going on Twitter and sharing things and posting things, because I do think it's such a bad. Every time I log into Twitter or Facebook or whatever, it's such a cognitive risk, both to my thinking. Like, it warps your brain. It makes you think whatever is popular, and it incentivizes you to think whatever is popular, and then just the switching costs and so on. So, like, my real dream would be that it's something like, as indie thinkers grows, and it's not just about indie thinkers, it's like everyone can have their own indie thinkers. Alex, you could build your own indie thinkers, someone else could build their own indie thinkers, whatever. It's like people like you and I will, I think, over time realize that we need to focus more and more on just quiet work of reading, writing, and developing our own thoughts, and we are going to need to insulate ourselves as much as possible from the public web. But we'll want probably some kind of support system, whether that's like other people in the community or people in your audience who can kind of do that for you. And ideally, not to get like too futuristic or whatever, but again, I think crypto really is interesting in this regard, because one of the things that crypto offers, and it's increasingly clear that, to me anyway, that crypto is definitely taking over. I think it's hard to argue against crypto being here to stay, and I think it's increasingly evident that it really is a kind of world historical paradigm shift. What crypto allows is increasingly sophisticated and fluid forms of value sharing, basically. So you can imagine a situation where, like, Alex has her own private community of people, of her fans and audience and interlocutors and collaborators, where, like, Alex, you don't even need to go on Twitter, or you don't even need to go on Facebook or whatever to get the word out about what you're doing. You just focus on doing the highest quality work you can, insulated from this chaotic, mind warping public internet. And your fans or supporters can go and then spread your word, share it with their friends or whatever, and actually, in a way, get paid for it. Like, they can be part of the unit. So it's a matter of, what I'm really driving at here is that what people call private communities, that's kind of a corny, like, innocent sounding name for it. What it really is turning individual creators into collective organisms. So, like, I think successful creators will basically just create their own social organism where they and their fans slash audience members slash interlocutors or collaborators are like one unit, and all the people in the unit have a share in the success of the unit, and they will kind of tell their friends themselves, because they want to, a, because they believe in the work and they find it worthy of sharing, but two, also because they will, in a way, share in the upside. So I think where we're going is essentially individual creators are going to become kind of collective business operations, more or less, where fans become stakeholders. And it yeah, that's kind of that's like the really long term. That's somewhat futuristic, but there are a lot of indications that this is kind of already happening. And I think crypto is going to make it increasingly possible and smooth to do that. So yeah, I envision a world where people like you and I are increasingly out of the day-to-day tasks of, like, typing things on Twitter, sharing things on whatever, and we're just doing high quality original thinking, reading, writing, and developing ideas and speaking, maybe recording podcasts and stuff like this, still making videos. But we'll be increasingly withdrawn from the public web in one way or another, whether that's through a paradigm changing platform like Urbit, or it's through a major shift towards deep community, where the community kind of does the sharing for us. That's my kind of longer theoretical perspective.
Yeah, I like the direction of it, and it's actually like a thing that I've been feeling as well. I mean, the the Twitter brain has really has really shredded my long, like, my attention span. Forming complex sentences is a bit harder than it used to be. Like, it's, you can feel it. And I always liken it to smoking. Like, the level of addiction that I had to Twitter, it's been, I don't think smoking's been that
I
bad,
suspect it's
really. Like,
particularly bad for you because you've been so good at it, right? Like, I would be curious to hear, like, your experience, because you really started tackling Twitter hard. It was very clear you made a conscientious decision to, I'm gonna attack Twitter. I'm gonna write on Twitter. I'm gonna win this Twitter game, and
I
you
was
succeeded. You were
really
able to, like, grow an
addicted.
audience quite fast,
There's a
and it looks like you still are. So you clearly, decoded the code. You hacked the code. You figured it out, and you put in the work, and now you have, like, I would say you probably have a very good finger on the pulse of, like, how the Twitter game works. Do you find that, like, is it especially bad for you? Like, are you struggling with? Do you feel like your brain is being captured and you're having a hard time thinking outside of the terms of what plays well on Twitter, or what are you noticing?
Yeah, that there's that as well. I feel like there's kind of a feedback loop with it, because I started getting more and more addicted to
Yeah.
it the better I was at it. I didn't really know I was good at it until I was getting lots of followers and people were sharing my stuff, and I was like, "Whoa, I'm really good at this." So it kind of made me want to be on it, especially because I've been in this COVID bunker for the last year, and I'm like, you get this flood of social proof, and you're like, yeah, this is really good. So continue, do more, do more, do more. And but yeah, there's that layer of it as well. Not only kind of the physiological layer where it literally shreds your brain, but it feels more and more like I'm in these switching phases. Like you were saying, the 15-minute switching phases, but it's almost all day where I'm just kind of like it's like moving my brain through molasses to do big chunks of work. It really has become quite hard. It used to be a bit more, smooth. Cool. Yeah, and a little technical hiccup, but we're back. One thing I wanted to ask you about is marriage. You're a married man, and you've been talking about marriage in the past, and so have I. And we're relatively new to the game, but I think we've got a little bit of experience with it. Tell me about this marriage maximalism of yours.
Yeah, well, there's a lot I could say here. I do have a lot of thoughts on marriage, but I would say the main talking point I'm kind of most interested in right now is I really think young men should be should marry her already. Basically, that's kind of the message I think I'm going to be working on a little bit more, because in my case, I have a somewhat unique story in that, I mean, I'm 34 and I've been married for almost 8 years now, which actually means in our generation, I married relatively young. I got married when I was
Yeah.
about 27, and nowadays that's actually getting married young. So I only got married. I shouldn't say only married. That sounds bad, but we got married in some part because of we had this kind of outside forcing function. We had this exogenous kind of moment of decision that made the marriage question more salient and more urgent. Many people don't have that kind of exogenous forcing function. In my case, it was getting a job in England. I got a good academic job in England, and had to, was obviously eager to move there to accept this very good job that I was very lucky to get. And so I tried originally to get my girlfriend Aria a visa, and it was rejected. And we kind of talked to the lawyer, and it was basically clear that the only way she would be able to come is if we were married. And so we had to think and talk. It was, and I mean, I pretty much knew I wanted to marry her within like 6 months of dating her. So I knew that in my heart of hearts, but I never would have got around to doing it really, like if there wasn't a reason to force the decision, you know what I mean? And I think it's the same for her. I think she would say the same more or less in her own words. But so basically, this kind of taught me, and it's one of the best things that ever happened to me. I consider it this like mirror. I consider it a miracle. Basically, I feel like it's just this extraordinary blessing that this outside circumstance just basically forced me and my girlfriend to grow up faster than we would have otherwise. Because I know for sure, if there wasn't that forcing function, I would have been just like all the other men my age, and I would have probably dated her for like 6 years, and then eventually, maybe she gets pregnant, maybe she like forces me to marry, whatever. It's like that's how people do things nowadays. And I know that would have been me. I'm not in any way superior to this kind of standard man. It's not like I knew something or saw something, or I was like trad genius or something like that to get married relatively young. No, it was this external shock that forced us to decide, basically. And I'm so grateful to that, and I feel like it basically fast forwarded me in life. It gave me so much more. It opened up this whole new superior way of thinking and being and living that is just more wholesome and also more challenging, though, in many ways. I mean, it's very, very hard being married. It's extremely hard. So I understand why people don't exactly want to jump into it. There are a lot of risks involved, and so basically, I have this unique personal experience where I both deeply understand why men my age don't do this, or young men don't get married if they don't have to, but I feel obligated to kind of like spread the good word in a way, because I've been blessed by this miracle that basically I feel like it saved me like 8 years of my life that I would have otherwise
Mhm.
pissed away, probably just dating and whatever. So I feel like so blessed by that miracle that I feel somewhat called to, you know, write down what I've learned, write down what I've noticed, and I really want to kind of send the message to men in their 20s, like, dude, if you're dating for more than a few months and she doesn't annoy you and she's hot and cool, like, just marry her, dude. It's like,
Mhm.
maybe not so radical as that, but something like that is kind of the message that I think, because, yeah, it's like people just the contemporary kind of liberal norms around freedom of choice, and it's like we want everything to be chosen, ends up meaning that we just spend so much time waiting for like the perfect thing, that before you know it, you're 40 or 50, and you've just dated a bunch of people and you have nothing to show for it. It's a real tragedy. So I think on some level it is as simple as you have to just suck it up and marry her already. Like, just do it. No one's perfect. You're as imperfect as she is, and if she's willing to marry you, you should consider yourself very lucky, because you're probably fucked up in many ways, right? So it's like that's I think I want to write a book about marriage, and I think it's going to be around this. It's going to the provisional title is just marry her, because I think that's essentially what it boils down to. It's like it's a leap of faith. It doesn't have to be like fully rationally proven to be the best choice for you, because there are certain things in life that don't that don't boil down in that way. And there are certain experiences and benefits and values in life, certain experiences, certain parts of the human condition that you're never going to access if you see it incorrectly as this rational calculus. Where if you see it as a rational calculus, you're just never going to get to it, and you're going to deny yourself whole pockets of human existence that are very good and very, very necessary and very, superior to otherwise. And so I do see it as, on some level, a kind of, I wouldn't call it irrational decision, but I would call it a kind of extra rational decision. It's a leap of faith, and it will make you better. It will make your life better, and you might not know that, but on some level, you have to just do it. And I think if you're dating someone for more than, I would say certainly if you're dating someone for a year, if you can date someone for a whole year and you're happy, and they don't say or do anything regularly that truly like pisses you off and that you really really irks you painfully. Well, first of all, if that's the case, you shouldn't be dating them for a year. First of all, but second of all, assuming like your things are harmonious, you're attracted to her, and she has a good character, and she doesn't do anything to like truly upset you or piss you off or irk you on a really regular basis, then if you've been dating for a year, it's time to get married. Just do it. Don't think about it. Just do it. That's kind of my message.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I resonate with this message. I think I think it's a good message, and I think there is hope for this message, in the way of more high profile people adopting it. Because if you look at what the message has been around marriage and around long term committed monogamy, not cheating, committing yourself to marriage like as a covenant, as something that you really mean it, that it's going to be for your whole life. It's not been good. Like all the media depictions, it's all these boomers airing their neuroses about whatever daddy issues they have, and telling them that this is hell on earth. Don't get married, don't have children. But I think like the tide is shifting now, and as much as people like to hate on the trad larpers, I guess I engage in that a little bit myself. It's good to be out there, to be doing something wholesome, to be doing something that adds pro-social value to society. Because when you're in a marriage, it's like, yeah, it's good for you, it's good for your family, it's good for the wider society. It's kind of these like Petersonian concentric circles. You're really doing the world a solid by having kids, being a responsible person and building something together with someone that's not just I know, pissing yourself at 4 a.m. in some dingy dive bar with the sixth date this week. This is just one alternative timeline, but there are many ways in which you could be doing something shitty. But yeah, I feel like the more visibility this gets, and the more high profile and kind of like prestige stuff this attracts, the more people with clout can do this, then the better it's going to be. We're at the bottom of this hill, but I think it's getting there.
I totally agree. I completely agree. I mean, I could go off on so many other points that I think are very good points, which is why I think I need to write this book. But one that comes to mind is that you also like men will find, I believe, that aging kind of sneaks up on you. It's this gradual thing where it's not like you see it coming in advance. That your looks will decay, your attractiveness will decay. It's a natural part of life. And I have found that my looks and my general kind of physical attractiveness has, even though I take fairly good care of myself. I'm fairly fit and in shape, and I eat well and all of that, more or less. Not a saint or anything, but I have found that you know I'm not as handsome as I used to be, and it snuck up on me faster than I expected, and it's very hard to be aware of it. It's like, I think that's something people need to keep in mind, because you might be 27 and you might be in great shape, you might look really handsome, and you might be able to get as many girls as you want. But when you're 33, you might not be as handsome as you currently are, and you might not realize it until it's too late. And it's just one of the many reasons why I feel very blessed that I got married relatively early, because yeah, that's the kind of thing that can sneak up on you. So I could say much more, but I don't know how much you want to go into it.
Yeah, no, I think I love this subject. I feel like too few people are talking about it, and finally I've got the trad larper to myself to talk about it with. So I'm super excited to chat about this stuff. But I feel like the declines not only in youthful aesthetics but also in youthful energy are surprising to people. Like a lot of people talk about how women they hit the wall. It's like, oh, you're super hot, and then the next day you look like a hag, and that's a bit of an exaggeration. It happens a little bit earlier for women, obviously, but I feel like it happens to everyone. And I feel like even for guys who think, okay, I'm just going to play the field for 20 years, and then I might settle down with some woman from Southeast Asia or whatever fantasy idea you have, you just won't have the energy to commit to create a marriage, even with kids, without kids, that it takes if you're just leaving this to the last point. Plus, you've literally been, probably been dating everyone under the sun, and that leaves its mark. It's really, I think the whole pair bonding thing is real. But I think it's not just, everyone talks about women, but I really do think men have this as well, especially if they've been really successful with women, where they're like, okay, I need to settle down. Which one's it going to be? Well, she has to have this laundry list of qualities that includes all the qualities of all the women I've ever been with. So yeah, good luck in finding her, because that's just not there.
Totally, completely agree with all of that. And I think there's also an issue where as you get older, you get more stuck in your ways. This is well known. This is well documented, both in kind of oral knowledge, but it's also well researched. It's very true. You become less cognitively fluid, and this becomes a problem for marriage because at a certain age, you don't really want to negotiate or compromise your life with someone else. You know what I mean? But when you're young, this kind of refers to what you were saying before about energy. You know, when you're young, you have more passion, you have more kind of eagerness and willingness to find an arrangement that works for both of you, and then you can both kind of get settled into that. And if you inevitably get stuck in your ways to some degree, you can get stuck in the ways that you have negotiated with your wife that works for both of you. Whereas I think what happens is, if you don't get married until you're like 35 or something like that as a man, well, by the time you're 35, you have certain expectations about what life should look like or what your everyday life should be or feel like that are not going to really realistically fit into marrying and moving in with someone else on a long-term basis, right? So it's like you can kind of shoot yourself in the foot by giving yourself too much freedom and too much control for too long. Whereas if you just gave up that freedom, that obviously you're not giving up all your freedom, but you're just significantly curtailing your own freedom by merging your life with someone else. If you do it earlier when you're more cognitively fluid, it will work and it can be okay and you can adapt. Whereas at a certain age, you might be not able to adapt to merging your life with another person. So that's another reason against waiting too long, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, that's for sure a major one, and I feel like people definitely underestimate what it how much freedom you get once you get married. And I feel like you've made this point before, but like your life changes in the sense that it sounds a bit weird because people now they live for the idea of novelty, and they're like, okay, if I can't have novelty, like what is life good for? But kind of reduction of complexity is also an important factor. You know who to trust. You have your rock. You're building a home. You have direction. Like simplifying. Detangling your brain in that way is really a load off of you once you're married. Like, okay, this is my person. This is my home. These are my children, if you have them. But yeah, it's and it opens you up to do stuff. Like, I wouldn't have been able to do this podcast if I was like neurotic, living in a lonely, dingy apartment somewhere in a big city. Like, no way.
It's so true. It's really really hard to focus on important long-term projects when you're dating around. I completely agree with that because when you're dating around, you're incentivized to be doing what's cool, what's hip, and really valuable, worthwhile projects usually aren't. They're not very they're not very impressive for a long time. For a long time, it's just plodding away, in obscurity and building something meaningful, and when you're dating, you never want to show up to a first date and tell your date that you're working on some obscure long-term project that doesn't really have any results, doesn't really have anything like that they can relate to or be impressed by. You know what I mean? So it really, dating incentivizes kind of short-term bullshit types of, accomplishment behavior, whereas marriage incentivizes, it allows you to do kind of weird long-term things that are really important to you, that you really believe in, but they maybe aren't going to show results for a very long time, because you don't need to impress anyone in the short term. You become more concerned about making a really long-lasting impact in a way that people will really respect, and you can focus on that long-term battle because you already have the buy-in of your partner. So I completely agree with that.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of one of the tensions that I have when I think about kind of polyamorous marriage and things like that. Like I feel like you're considering, you essentially, you keep dating within your marriage and you never get that complexity reduction. You're inviting complexity back in. Only that's just one dimension of it. There's like you posted something about step parents, and that was kind of like this horrifying hair raising statistic, which I think adds to the polyamory combination as well. Because have one step parent is already like a nightmare scenario. Have 16 of them in a commune, then okay, that might be even more intense. So
Yo,
yeah,
yeah.
there's
I mean, I have friends who are poly. I have friends who are married in poly, but like so I'm not throwing shade on anyone in particular, but I'm personally, the very idea of a poly marriage or an open marriage, it's a contradiction. It's marriage is all or nothing. You're either all in 100% or you're not married, frankly. So that's how I think about it. Not to say, people can have their own arrangements, and if you're happy, if you're in a legal marriage with someone and you're also both dating people and you're happy, then go to town. I'm not here to tell anyone that they don't understand themselves or something like that. But all I'm saying is, whatever that is, it's not marriage. It's something else, because
yeah,
marriage is, it's sacred. It's a sacrament. It's truly, it's like you're either completely bound and all in on each other, or you're not. And if you're not, then you're not really married, is how I think about it. And frankly, I think all of the most impressive and important benefits and gains that come through marriage, what makes marriage so special and amazing and wonderful, you really only get them if you're truly all in. That's something that I've observed, and that's something that it's a deep conviction of mine. If you're even 99.9% in, there are aspects of marriage that aren't going to open themselves up to you. There are parts of that aren't going to ever come to fruition to you. You have to truly, with your heart and soul, be 100% in, no matter what, come hell or high water, till death do us part. I will go down with the ship if need be. That's what unlocks all of the magic of marriage. And anything short of that, you, it's you're not even really going to be experiencing what marriage really is, I believe.
yeah, I completely agree with that. And I feel like a lot of what you hear now with high divorce rates and people either not getting married or splitting up, I feel like it's because you're not really seeing it as a covenant. You see it as a lifestyle choice. It's like it's just a friends with benefits, with more benefits, with extra benefits, and then we have a big party, and then we live together. And when if you ever step on my toes, I maybe give you 3 strikes, but then you're out. And this is kind of the relationship model that I see with most people. I mean, this infinite optionality seems to be eating away at the most precious things in life. And I think it's the same thing with the fertility crisis with children as well. Like the idea is like you don't want to make a choice that's going to curtail your optionality forever. Like I see this to me is the main thing that I see people talk about. Why my friends, they don't have children. It's like, I mean, I'm 32 now. I'm gonna have a child at 32, and my friends think I am completely insane because they're like, "What's what gives?" I'm like, "Well, I'm not getting any younger, that's for sure. So, this is the time to do it." But it's still, and I feel like this is another really big dimension to it. Like, there's almost ostracism for people who decide to get married and do this. I don't know. I feel like it's hard to make the jump because you will be isolated. It's the community's not there.
Right. Well, the trick is finding other married people with kids and making them your social set. But that's increasingly difficult, right? Because nowadays, I don't know about you, but it's like a lot of the people I hang out with are my age and they're not married and they don't have kids. So it's like it can be somewhat challenging to find that that group. But I think that is basically the solution to what you're talking about. You need to just basically start to switch your friend group away from the single people with no kids, and just finding other married couples with kids to be friends with. I mean, that's something that I'm like, I still love my friends who are single. I'm not throwing shade on anyone, but I mean, especially I mean, we don't have kids yet, so we can still kind of, be in this milieu, but we already kind of feel it as a little bit of a conflict, a little bit of, it doesn't quite feel quite right that all of our friends are, most of them. We have a few friends who are married, have kids, but I think once we have kids, for sure, we're going to try to like make significant investments in just finding new friends who have kids, because it's just very hard to relate otherwise. For those of you, anyone listening who's my friend who's single, I'm not going to like ditch you. I'm not saying that, but I need more married people with kids in my life.
Yeah, have kids. Have kids. Justin's friends who are single, and pronto.
Yeah, it's also like have kids, because I mean, I don't have any. This might be too much information, but I mean, I don't have any real anxiety or anything. But like, we've been trying for a few months now, only like 4 or whatever. But when I'm starting to feel a little. I'm pretty confident we'll be fine, but it's starting to make me realize like, oh wow, like it's definitely possible. Maybe like it would have been easier when we were younger, So it's like, and a lot of people face this, right? I mean, I think we're going to be fine, but this is something that a lot of people face when they wait long, especially people who wait longer than me. When you want to, you might not be able to, and that's a very scary and very painful thing. Like I said, we've only been trying for 4 months, and we haven't gotten lucky yet. And I'm starting to feel a little like existential, like dread, or I don't know what to call it exactly. And I'm even and that's even knowing pretty confidently we'll be fine, but I can't imagine what it might feel like to be, if I was like, 40 and my wife was, 37, and we were having a hard time. Like that thought of wanting to have a child, but realizing maybe you waited too long and maybe it will never happen. That just feels very like that's a very sad situation to be in. Not sad like looking down on them. I mean sad for being sympathetic. Like that's an extreme kind of sadness. And people want to watch out for that, because it's just like I said before about aging. You might be like a super suave, handsome 27-year-old pulling in girls as easily as you want, but before you know it, the hairline might start receding. You might, it's gonna be hard to stay super slim as you get older, that kind of stuff. And you might find yourself like not too distant future, all of a sudden you're like, oh, not as attractive as it used to be. And that these things sneak up on you. It's like watching paint dry. There's never a moment where, oh, okay, the paint is about to dry, I need to get on this. No, it's like boiling a frog, right? Like once you realize anything's happening, it's too late. So um, it's a very similar thing here that we're talking about when it comes to fertility, and people need to be aware of it, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I've annoyingly harp on about this all the time because I kind of am in these circles. I talk to these girls, and a lot of people have problems, and you don't even have to be 37. I mean, the thing is, it's age on one level, but it's also all of the like environmental factors, all sorts of things like fertility seems, at least from my anecdata, to be quite a challenge for my generation of women. I've been super lucky. I guess I'm just weird. Yeah, weird, Eastern European stock, but it could have gone either way. But it also kind of confronts you with this cosmic dimension that everyone wants to avoid. Like, once you have children, because that's one thing I've kept thinking about. Like, there are like 7,000 failure points in this adventure that we're on now. Like, miscarriage, stillbirth, the baby gets sick, it dies, SIDS, all sorts of levels of absolute cosmic horror that I'm signing up for now, because I want to go on this. And I could imagine someone who's, people who've been sheltered, and a lot of us have been sheltered from, the realities of life, would just want to not even, you can't even start contemplating this stuff until it comes to you. So I feel like that's definitely one thing I was thinking about earlier in my life, and I was like, I wouldn't even know how to deal with this stuff.
Totally. It's true. But no risk, no reward. It's like you only access the true cosmic beauties by exposing yourself to the cosmic horrors. You know what I mean? I think there's a pretty direct proportionality there. So it's like, yeah, if you want to live like a super milk toast life where you never really feel anything that powerfully deep and good, um, and you want to avoid the risk of these kinds of fears and problems and potential catastrophes, then yeah, sure, fine, live like a milk toast life that never accesses the deep good or the deep bad. But I want the whole thing. I want the whole. I want the maximum. I want everything. I want all of life. I want the whole maximum range of what life involves personally.
Yeah, I like this lens on things, and I feel like more people are starting to adopt this, and more people are starting to understand that you really can't have the good without the bad. You can live in this tepid pod for a while, but I feel like a lot more people want to break out of the pod. So I'm really excited to be part of the movement of people trying to break out of the pod. Um, so I have a question of the show, which I usually try to wrap things up with. Do you have a subversive thinker, like a writer or intellectual that is an inspiration to you that you think belongs out there that people should read more of or know about?
Ooh, so more like on the underrated, underrecognized side you're asking
Yeah,
about?
yeah.
Hmm. Well, I'm spoiled for choice now that I run Indie Thinkers. I have a list of people I can easily draw on. But now the problem I face is not picking favorites. I don't want to. I don't want to pick favorites. But yeah, Indie Thinkers is basically filled with exactly this type of person. It's kind of the whole idea behind it. So it's all really smart people who want to do long term intellectual work, but most of them you haven't heard of. But some of them you might have heard of. So let me think who would be a good person to give a shout out to. One of our members who's been most successful since joining, and I mean, I'm not taking credit for his success, although everything he's done to really be successful recently came after he joined. So I take a little bit of, I'm just happy to see that, but it's not like I caused it, or I'm certainly not taking credit. But he's probably, I would say, our most impressive success case in terms of people who come into Indie Thinkers and then really like kind of get involved, but also kind of use the group to help them and then actually successfully kind of take off in a way would be Jeffrey Schellenberger. Do you know him?
Yeah, he's been on a podcast. I know
Oh,
Jeff.
that's right. Of course. Yeah. So shout out to Jeffrey. I think he's very impressive and currently underrated for sure. I know him just through Indie Thinkers, but he's super smart, great guy, and he seems to be increasingly he's a lecturer at NYU, but he's increasingly putting more and more of his effort and investment into his independent kind of profile or platform online, and he's succeeding a lot. I think he's going to probably be much bigger than he currently is. So you heard that here first. He's very good. Another person I would give a shout out to from Indie Thinkers is Emmett Penny. Who do you know him by any chance?
Yeah, he has a podcast as well.
Yeah,
No?
that's right. He has a
Yeah.
relatively new podcast called
Mhm.
Exhaust, and again, just very smart guy, very thoughtful, and I think currently is very underpriced and under recognized. So those are two names I would shout out that I bet you in 5 years and 10 years they'll be they'll be much more recognized and respected. So those are my two.
Yeah, definitely can concur with Jeff. I feel like a lot of people should be reading more Jeff, and I think his perspective on postmodernism, especially, is really useful, given what's going on in the culture wars, and he's got a really fresh lens on it. So yeah.
Yeah, well, he's kind of like you in that he, not too in the not too distant past, kind of just decided he wanted to be more serious about doing work on the internet and applying his academic background and his frameworks to truly genuinely interesting kind of internet native questions and phenomena in a genuinely independent way. And if you can do that and you can follow through and you can put in the work, it works. Like it is possible to build an audience and build a profile and build a name for yourself and build an audience by just deciding to and then being strategic about it, but also like putting in the work and but also being honest and authentic to what you're really all about. Like it's fairly reproducible. It's not like a magical obscure process about how this works. I think it's fairly reproducible. So I just have a lot of respect for people like you, people like Jeff, I'm sorry, who basically, decide they want to win on the internet and they set about doing it, and then they succeed in doing it. I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah, for sure. I think doesn't Jeffrey have a new course with you guys, like a Gerard course?
That's right. That's right. I have not yet uploaded the website, but it's about to launch. So we're kind of we've been moderately spreading the word low key, but I haven't announced it yet. But yeah, Jeff will be teaching a full 8-week course on Rene Girard starting in mid June. I'm going to be dropping the website for that and letting people sign up for updates like any day now probably. So thanks for asking.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited about that. I feel like both Jeff and Gerard deserve more interest and more more clout.
Definitely. Yeah, it'll be really good. I just did a course with Michael Millerman who taught Leo Strauss, and it was massive. Like a lot of people signed up, and everyone loved it. It just finished actually. So yeah, I'm getting pretty good at this online course game. It's like a weird thing, to do all. There's no one else. There's really no one else out there who's doing like highbrow philosophy courses online outside of institutions. But I've done a few now, and yeah, so I've learned a thing or two about like what makes them work well, what makes them work less well, and yeah, I'm really quite pleased with the model, and people seem to love it. And so yeah, we'll be doing more. I'm also going to be doing a course in July with Nina Power on Ivan Illich.
Oh, nice. Yeah, another person who deserves more. I think that we got more like Illich shout outs on this podcast than I guess any other subversive thinker.
Nice, yeah. His stock price is rising big time right now, and rightfully so, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Well, this was really exciting. Is there any other place you people can find you? Anything you would like to promo?
If people want to hear more from me or follow my work, the easiest way is just go to otherlife.co. That's otherlife.co, and just sign up there. And I send out, writings and videos and podcasts and all of that kind of stuff there. So that's the easiest way to follow. And yeah, there's indiethinkers.org. But that's specifically for people who are really trying to get serious about pursuing a long-term intellectual project, and they really want to make that like a major part of their focus in their life. Indiethinkers.org. It's a private membership community. It's not cheap, but it's for like a very specific type of person who is trying to do something quite hard. And we have a lot of features and benefits that support a very specific goal of basically building a long-term intellectual life purely on the internet outside of institutions. So our members quite like it. It seems like it really works, and people are happy with it. So I'm proud of that. Indiethinkers.org.
Yeah.
That's all I got, I think.
Yeah, I mean, well, you should be. I definitely endorse it fully. So whoever wants to, do writing, thinking, talking on the internet, yeah, go to Indie Thinkers. You'll find a great community there.
Thanks, Alex. I appreciate that. And thanks for having me on. This was fun.